After a week off, the UFC is back in action with a fight night in Perth, Western Australia, headlined by a light heavyweight fight with title implications. In this video, I'm going to be going through, giving my full card predictions, picking a winner for every single fight, main card, and the prelims. If you guys enjoy the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. And then there will be timestamps in the description if you guys want to jump around to specific matchups. But let's just dive right into it here. We're going to start off with a heavyweight fight. Both guys making their UFC debut. We have Brando Pericic taking on Elisha Ellison. Now, honestly, both of these guys kind of feel like rushed signings. Now, it is heavyweight, so I do appreciate the effort of trying to bring like some fresh blood into the weight class. But I don't think either of these dudes, at least when I watched them, they didn't seem like, screaming guys who needed to be added to the UFC roster. Both also fairly inexperienced. Pericic is 4-1, 3 knockout wins, 1 submission win. Like his last 2 opponents had 0-0 records, like they were making their MMA debut or their pro debut. So it's not even like these guys are facing like really solid pre-UFC competition. And then Ellison, he only has 1 more fight under his belt, 5-1 record, 4 knockouts, 1 submission win. I do think of the two, Pericic is the more technical fighter. He's pretty impressive out of the clinch if he can get there. Dirty boxing, elbows, knees. I also think he's going to be the better grappler in this matchup and the guy who's probably going to test Ellison in that realm. All 4 of his wins are in the first round, and then the one fight where he went into round 2, he ended up getting submitted. It's actually the same thing with Ellison, where all 5 of his wins were in round 1 and then also got submitted in the second round. I do think Ellison is the better athlete in this matchup. Does seem like, a pretty solid athlete for the heavyweight weight class. He's very explosive, but I also think he has a style where he could get caught, and I think he could fade as this fight goes on. I do lean towards Pericic in this matchup. I do think if he can just get into the clinch, try to use his grappling, I think he can wear on Elisha Ellison, and I think he ends up picking up a ground and pound round 2 knockout. So going with Pericic to start off the night here. Then we have a women's bantamweight fight between Luana Carolina and Michelle Montague. For Carolina here, she is riding a 3-fight win streak, but against pretty low-level competition within the UFC. She's primarily a striker, fine grappler, nothing crazy there, and then does have like some pretty decent cardio. For Montague here, kind of an interesting addition to the UFC roster. This is her UFC debut. She has a 6-0 record. She went 4-0 in the PFL. All 6 of her wins are by submission, and all 6 of her wins are by rear naked choke. I do think she's going to have like the size, physicality advantage in this matchup. She fought at 145 in the PFL. This is down at 135. But Luana Carolina has taken a lot of her fights at 125, has kind of struggled to make weight as of late, but you have like a woman moving down and then a woman moving up. I do think Montague is going to, have the real edge here in physicality. Now, Montague does have a pretty weak strength of schedule. She is a little bit sloppy on the feet, like not super dangerous there. She is going to want to grapple. She's going to want to find the clinch and just try to get Luana Carolina to the ground. I am going to lean towards Montague here. I do think just stylistically, with her having the size advantage in this matchup, I think that's going to help her kind of, institute her grappling game plan. I think she's going to have some success, and we have seen when she gets the fight to the ground, she is finishing it there. So I'm going to go with Michelle Montague by round 2 submission. I think she wears her down in the first and then ends up getting that submission win in round 2. Then looking at men's lightweight, we have Jamie Mullarkey taking on Rolando Bedoya. I think both of these guys are probably fighting for their jobs at this point. Jamie Mullarkey has been knocked out in the first round in back-to-back fights. He's 1-3 in his last 4. And then Rolando Bedoya is honestly kind of fortunate to even be getting another shot here. He just has a straight-up 0-3 record in the UFC. For Mullarkey, I actually think he's like a pretty solid, well-rounded fighter. His big issue is just his durability. He's been dropped in 5 of his last 7 fights in the UFC. He's been knocked out in his last 3 losses. He is willing to mix things up, based on the matchup. But like skill for skill, it's not like he's getting outclassed by a lot of these dudes. It just is like he doesn't have the same power, as some of the dudes he's going up against, and then he doesn't have the durability to take some of those shots. Then for Bedoya, he's kind of had a weird UFC run, had a pretty solid debut against Chaos Williams, arguably won that fight, was a split decision, and then he just hasn't quite been able to find that same form in his last couple of matchups. He's dropped back-to-back unanimous decisions. He was dropped in both of those fights against Jai Herbert and Song Kanon. He's someone who's going to throw a lot out there, great output, averaging 7.3 significant strikes per minute, but he's also hittable and he's absorbing a lot, 6.4 significant strikes absorbed per minute. He also just hasn't really shown the ability to hurt his UFC opponents, which is why I do think this could be a decent matchup here for Jamie Mullarkey. But on the other hand, if you ever were to, showcase the power or at least, put your opponent in some trouble, this would be the matchup against Jamie Mullarkey. And then for Bedoya, when he was up at 170, it did seem like he was just kind of too small for the weight class. Didn't have this super solid physique, looked a little soft. But then when he moved down to 155, I don't know, it just didn't really translate either. I am going to lean towards Jamie Mullarkey here. I think skill for skill, he's the better guy in this matchup. I think he gets back on track, and I think he picks up a decision win. Then going down to bantamweight, we have Colby Thicknesse taking on Josias Musasa. If you guys remember, Thicknesse was the dude who debuted, also in the debut against Alexandre Topuria. I thought he looked fine in that matchup, didn't get finished. He's fairly well-rounded. I think the big issue is just he's kind of limited athletically. He's not super explosive. I don't think he's someone who's going to have like these huge moments or be finishing fights at the UFC level. He's a 7-1 record, 2 wins by knockout, 2 by submission. On the other side here with Musasa, we saw him get kind of dominated in his UFC debut, got dropped, then got submitted by Carlos Vera, someone who had not looked great early on in his UFC career. For Musasa, 7 of his 8 wins are by knockout. He is a little bit reckless on the feet. He's not super technical. He is there to be hit, but I also just think he is the way better athlete. He is way more explosive than Thicknesse. He hits hard, and so I do think we could see Musasa kind of put himself in danger, but I don't know if Thicknesse really has like the finishing upside to capitalize. So I am going to lean towards Musasa picking up the win here. I'm predicting this to be kind of a sloppy back and forth fight. I think Musasa is going to have the bigger moments. I think Thicknesse might win, more of the minutes, but I am going to lean towards Musasa's big moments, kind of giving him the win here. So I'm going to pick him by decision. Then at middleweight, we have Andre Petroski taking on Cam Rowston. For Petroski, he's kind of got an interesting skill set. He's a very good grappler, averages 3.2 takedowns per 15 minutes, hits those takedowns at a pretty solid rate, 51% takedown accuracy, has some decent submission skills. He's not great on the feet. He really tenses up and loads up when he throws his shots. Like, he really telegraphs everything. It's not a lot of jabs. It's a lot of just like winging these big shots. And then he is kind of fragile, like doesn't have the best chin, can kind of wilt if things aren't going super well for him. For Rowston, this is his UFC debut. He had a really weak pre-UFC strength of schedule. He has a 12-3 record, but he only has 3 wins against guys with winning records, and those records were 5-0, 4-3, and 3-1. So he has really not been tested by like anything close to UFC level competition. He is big for this weight class, 6'3", with a 78-inch reach. He has 4 knockout wins, 7 submissions. Not a super technical striker, but we did see him pick up a KO win on the Contender Series. When we're looking at his grappling and specifically his grappling defense, he took on Torres Finney on the Contender Series and was thoroughly dominated on the ground. Torres Finney went 10 for 14 on takedowns, racked up 12 minutes of control time. That deficiency in the takedown defense is going to lean towards me picking Andre Petroski here. Now, Petroski and Finney are definitely like different quality or like different styles of grapplers. Like, Finney is going to be able to just shoot a ton of times. I don't think Petroski is going to have like the same takedown volume. Like, I think he's more explosive. He's going to have those bigger shots, almost like a Merab versus Aljo type situation. Obviously, neither of these dudes are close to the quality of Aljo and Merab. Where like Merab's going to spam the shots, Aljo, going to make the most of his if he does get them. So they're different, but I'm still going to lean towards Petroski here. I think he picks up a decision win and gets back on track. Even though he's had an up and down run in the UFC, he's still picking up these wins against guys who like aren't elite UFC fighters, but, have kind of found a way to stick on the roster. Whereas with Rowston, he's just super inexperienced against legit comp. So Petroski by decision will be the pick. Then moving down one weight class to welterweight, we have Jonathan Micallef taking on Oban Elliot. And these guys are coming off of very different last performances. I thought Micallef was super impressive in his UFC debut. I'm pretty sure I picked against him, picked Kevin Jousset to pick up that win. And Micallef had a really nice performance, great kicks. Did start to fade in round 3, but he was able to bank the first couple of rounds. And then in previous fights, he had shown the ability to be a capable grappler, kind of work in the clinch and have some success there. On the other side with Oban Elliot, I mean, he looked awful in his most recent fight against Seok-Hyun Ko. He was 30-27 as a minus 500 favorite. Now, it's not completely shocking to see a big favorite like that lose, but typically when someone who's that large of a favorite loses, it's because of one big moment, right? They get caught, they get clipped, they get finished, or maybe that one big moment kind of has an effect on the rest of the fight. I mean, this was just like, if you watch this, you would have thought that Ko should have been 5-6-1 favorite, the way he just completely dominated Oban Elliot. And it was like across the board domination. Ko outstruck him on the feet. He thoroughly outgrappled him, dominated him on the ground. And Oban Elliot is someone who is primarily a grappler. On the feet, he is a little bit chinny. I do think we could see Elliot push the pace on Micallef. And if he can't get going early, I could see him kind of pulling away late. But I just can't like really back him after that last performance. It was rough. Thought Micallef looked really solid in his UFC debut. So I'm going to pick Jonathan Micallef to pick up the decision win. Then moving all the way down to women's strawweight, we have Loma Lookboonmee taking on Alexia Thainara. Lookboonmee's racked up a really solid UFC record, 7-2. She's primarily a striker, but has been kind of willing to mix in the takedowns. She is straight up undersized, even in the lightest weight class at 115. Like, she's 5'1" with a 71-inch reach. For Thainara, I think she's actually a pretty interesting prospect. I think the UFC agrees, just based on this matchmaking. Like, Lookboonmee could realistically be getting a shot at the rankings. Instead, they're giving her Thainara, who only has like a 1-0 record in the UFC. She has submitted Molly McCann in her UFC debut. Also, the fact that they gave her that for her debut, I think also a great sign on how they view her. And she's just a very impressive grappler. She's fairly physically imposing. And I think technically, like, Lookboonmee's probably the better fighter. I think on the feet, Loma is better. But I kind of just feel like Thainara is going to use the physicality, use the grappling, and kind of take this fight where she wants it. We did see, I think it was Lookboonmee's most recent loss against Lupi Godinez. She was just completely out-grappled in that fight. I think we're going to see a repeat of that, and I think Thainara is going to pick up the decision win. Then we're going up to one of 3 light heavyweight fights on this card. We have Navajo Stirling taking on Rodolfo Bellato. For Stirling, I would consider him one of the better light heavyweight prospects. Now, the bar to be a prospect at light heavyweight is very low, but he's 2-0 in the UFC. He's young. He's 27 years old. He has a big frame. He's 6'4" with a 79-inch reach. He's primarily a striker, decent activity, 6.43 significant strikes per minute. He works all 3 levels on the feet, and then grappling, especially defensively, he's shown that he's fine. Was taken down a few times, I believe in his UFC debut, but wasn't able to get held there, and then actually used his own offensive grappling in his most recent win. I think it was against Ivan Urslan. On the other side here with Rodolfo Bellato, he has started off his UFC career with 1 win, 1 draw, and 1 no contest. All he needs here is a loss to complete the streak of the 4 different possible results you can have in MMA. For Bellato, on the feet, the dude is super hittable. He absorbs 6 significant strikes per minute. We saw in his first 2 UFC fights, he was dropped by Ihor Potieria. I mean, Potieria, like, beat the crap out of him. And the reason why Bellato was able to come back and win is just that he was so durable. He was so tough that Ihor just straight up got tired of beating the brakes off of him. He comes back, picks up a win in that fight. And then for Jimmy Crute, he got hurt in that first round. Ends up coming back once again. He has solid grappling, really solid takedown defense. We haven't seen a ton of his like offensive grappling, but I do think it is there, and it could be a path to victory in this matchup. I am still going to lean towards Navajo Stirling. Although he hasn't finished his first 2 UFC fights, I do think he's got some power. He is dangerous on the feet. And man, Bellato, he's just there to be hit. I think, that kind of style is going to come back to bite you at some point. I think it could happen here. I'm going to go Navajo Stirling round 1 knockout. Then a really fun matchup. I think this is kicking off the main card. We have Tom Nolan taking on Charlie Campbell. Nolan is a huge lightweight, 6'3" with a 73-inch reach. He is super dangerous on the feet. He has very powerful kicks. Is a little bit chinny. He was knocked out in his UFC debut. He was dropped early on in his next fight, but it does kind of seem like he's settling into the UFC. He's not coming out, with guns a-blazing like he was early on in his career. He's being a little bit more safe, still looking good, still in fun fights, but I do think we've seen some maturity there from like a fight IQ perspective. He's no longer just like kill or be killed right away in the first round. On the other side for Charlie Campbell, he is 2-0 in the UFC. 6 of his 9 pro wins are by knockout. He's a pretty clean, technical striker coming off a dogfight win against Trevor Peek. I am expecting just pretty much a striking battle between these two, and I am just going to lean towards Tom Nolan. I like what we've seen out of him so far in the UFC. I do think he's probably a little bit more dangerous in terms of finishing upside, although I was going to say I'd lean towards Campbell's durability. We did see him get finished on the Contender Series. I still think he probably has the durability edge, but I am going to lean towards Tom Nolan. We've seen him go to a decision in back-to-back fights. I think he goes there again, but I am going to pick Tom Nolan to pick up the decision win. Then at heavyweight, we know the UFC loves to throw these low-level heavyweight fights on the main card. I feel like they had been on a roll of not doing that, but we're back with Louis Sutherland taking on Justin Tafa. This is Sutherland's UFC debut. He has a 10-3 record. He's actually like kind of a decent athlete. He's definitely more athletic than he looks. 8 of his 10 wins are by knockout. He's primarily a striker, but can grapple if he wants to. It seems like he just prefers to strike. But when he does get the fight to the ground, he does have some pretty nice ground and pound. He's going to press forward. He throws pretty well in combination, some nice dirty boxing. In terms of like just someone coming into the UFC off the street, I do think he's kind of an interesting addition here to this weight class. And then for Tafa, it's pretty much the same thing with both the Tafa brothers. He's a good kickboxer, awful grappling, and throughout his UFC career, it's pretty much been like round 1 knockout or bust. If he can find the early big shot, he'll win. If he can't, he's probably on his way to losing. I'm going to back Sutherland here in this matchup. I just feel like the Tafa brothers' path to victory is just so narrow, and yeah, he could go out and just starch Sutherland in round 1, but I think Sutherland can put the pressure on a little bit. If he avoids that one big shot, I think he can build. I think he should go in with the game plan of wrestling early on, getting into the clinch, working there. I think he ends up finding the finish in round 2 with like a ground and pound knockout win. Then at 170, we have Jake Matthews taking on Neil Magny. I believe Jake Matthews called for this fight, ends up getting it here against Neil. It's a smart call out, right? At this point in Magny's career, not a huge threat. Kind of gets you right on the doorstep of getting into the top 15. Matthews is on a little bit of a roll, 3-fight win streak, coming off a very impressive win, a round 1 submission against Chidi and Njokuani. He's pretty well-rounded on the feet. He's very patient. He's defensively responsible. He's a capable grappler. 6 of his 15 UFC wins are by submission. I mean, I just think he has pretty sound fight IQ. We've seen in Neil Magny some of his recent fights, like the ones he's winning, I'm not trying to like take credit away from him, but like his opponents are just either completely wilting or just going in with really incompetent game plans, like we saw in his most recent fight against Elizu Zaleski dos Santos, who should have had the clear advantage on the feet. For whatever reason, he wants to test his grappling, and then all of a sudden just runs out of gas in round 2. Magny picks up the ground and pound win. We also saw in Magny's second most recent win against Mike Malott, Malott's gas tank just completely tanked with like 30 seconds left in that fight, and Magny ended up finishing that one in a fight that he was on his way to losing a decision. I still think at this point in his career, he's pretty flat. He's really like no threat on the feet. He's going to want to clinch. He's going to want like this gross, grimy grappling fight, and I just don't think Jake Matthews is going to give him that. He is competent in the grappling department, but I think he's going to want to keep this one on range. I think he's just going to pick at Neil Magny, and I think we're going to see Matthews cruise to a pretty easy decision win here. Then a fight that I would think is the favorite for the fight of the night. We have Jack Jenkins taking on Ramon Tavares. This is awesome matchmaking. Love what they did here. Jack Jenkins always going to bring it. Super fun striker. Is going to throw a lot at you on the feet. Blends his hands and legs really well together in combination. Nasty leg kicks. I believe he's broken 5 different dudes' legs so far in his MMA career. We have seen in some of his recent fights, he is kind of susceptible to getting grappled, held down. That is kind of how you can stifle him. But in this matchup, I just don't think Tavares kind of brings that threat here. He's not landed a single takedown in the UFC. So I do think this fight is going to be taking place on the feet, at least if that's where Jack Jenkins wants it. We have seen him be able to mix it up a little bit. It'll be interesting to see if he does that here in this matchup. For Tavares, he's a fun striker, going to throw a lot out there. He's a southpaw striker, boxing heavy style, does have some pop on the feet, can't hurt you if he catches you, but he is also very, very hittable. He absorbs 7.41 significant strikes per minute. That is an insanely high number. I am going to back Jack Jenkins in this matchup. I think on the feet, he's the better striker. I like the way he mixes things up, throws well in combination. I think he's going to break Tavares down. I think he's going to land some big shots. I think the damage is going to accumulate, and I think he's going to end up finding the finish on the feet in the second round. Then the second light heavyweight fight on this card, we have Jimmy Crute taking on Ivan Arslan. For Jimmy Crute, he is finally back in the win column, picked up a round 1 armbar win against Marcin Prachnio. In his previous 5 fights, he was 0-3-2. He's pretty powerful on the feet, has great jiu-jitsu, especially for the light heavyweight division. Does not have the best cardio and has historically struggled with leg kicks. For Arslan, he is 0-2 so far in the UFC, has faced like some pretty decent competition. This is also like Arslan's agent not doing him any favors here. First 2 UFC fights, Ian Cutelaba and Navajo Stirling, and then now he's taking on Jimmy Crute with an 0-2 UFC record. That seems crazy. That seems weird. But 10 of his 14 wins are by knockout. He has been taken down 3 times in both of his UFC fights. That is not great for, someone going up against Jimmy Crute, who is a very capable grappler, especially with his submission skills. So I think Jimmy Crute's going to get the fight to the mat. I think he ends up finding an early submission. I'll go Jimmy Crute, round 1 sub. And then we have arrived at the main event, the big light heavyweight fight here. Carlos Ulberg taking on Dominick Reyes. Carlos Ulberg is 8-1 in the UFC. He's on an 8-fight win streak. He's a very well-rounded striker, great lead hand, a ton of power there, whether it's the jab, the left hook. We've seen him finish at least 3 fights with that lead hand. He's very powerful. He's also proven to be fairly durable. I know he was knocked out in the debut, but that was just him being completely gassed and not really having any defensive ability there. I do think since that loss to Kennedy and Zechiku, he has become a more patient fighter. He's not going to use all his energy early on. I think that's especially important here in this matchup in his first 5-round fight. He has a big frame, even for light heavyweight, 6'4", with a 77-inch reach. He's been very tough to take down so far in the UFC, 85% takedown defense. And even if he has been taken down, it's not like people have been able to just completely ground him for 2, 3, 4 minutes at a time. He has been able to work back to his feet. And then, like I said, he doesn't have the 5-round experience like a guy like Dominick Reyes does, but I do think he's going to be patient enough. He's got a good team behind him. I don't think he's going to be super reckless and burn all his energy. And, we've seen where some guys might come out super hot against him, like an Alonzo Menefield. He can deal with that, found an early knockout in that fight. If someone's going to be a little bit more passive or he's in these lower volume fights, even though the significant strikes are actually fine against Jan Blachowicz, he is fine being a little bit more patient, passive in those matchups, and just kind of outpointing his opponent. On the other side here for Dominick Reyes, he's pretty much 2 wins away from having the most impressive career comeback of all time. This is a dude who looked like he was completely toast. From 2020 to 2022, he had lost all 4 fights, 3 of them by knockout. Someone who truly should have been crowned the champion at light heavyweight, should have been the man to beat John Jones. He gets screwed by the judges, then just goes on this brutal run of getting finished and finished viciously in a lot of those matchups. Since then, he has picked up 3 straight KO wins. On the feet, he's primarily a striker, sharp left hands, he's a southpaw, really nice body kicks. Also one of the best fighters, especially in the heavier weight classes, at fighting off his back foot, moving backwards. You don't want to blitz in recklessly against these guys. Sometimes in the heavier weight classes, you can kind of get away with it because dudes just don't have the athleticism. But we saw in the Nikita Krylov fight, he blitzes in recklessly, slide back left hand, knocks him out. Did the same thing against Dustin Jacoby. Did the same thing against Chris Weidman. I do think that Carlos Ulberg here has to know that you cannot blitz in recklessly. He will counter you, and he can put you out. So I do think this is a step up in competition here for Dominick Reyes. Obviously not from the dudes he's lost to, but some of his recent wins. It's a step up from Krylov, Jacoby, Anthony Smith, guys like that. Like I said, I don't think Ulberg is going to give him those windows. He is pretty safe, pretty cautious defensively, and I do think this is probably just going to be a clean striking battle. And in that type of just stand-up kickboxing match, I do prefer Carlos Ulberg. I also still have some concerns when it comes to the durability of Dominick Reyes. Like, I know he's gone 3 straight fights, hasn't gotten hurt, but he also hasn't gotten hit with like some real big shots in those matchups. So that is somewhat of a concern. Like, I do think Ulberg is the more durable guy. I would give, a kind of a bump up to Reyes here because he does have that 5-round experience. The dude went 5 rounds with John Jones. I think he won 3 of them. So he does potentially have the edge in the cardio department. I just don't know if he has like the style or if it's even optimal for him to go in and really try to push a heavy pace, because I do think he could put himself at risk. So I am leaning towards Carlos Ulberg. I could see, Dominick Reyes finding the shot. It would be pretty incredible to watch, but Carlos Ulberg is going to be my pick in this main event. I've kind of gone back and forth on how I think he gets it done. I think I'm going to go with a round 2 knockout. I do think he finds the finish. He is powerful. Obviously, Reyes does have the durability questions. So Ulberg round 2 knockout is going to be my prediction. But would love to hear your thoughts. I think it's a fun main event. Could definitely be a fun fight. We could see a fun finish. Some other, solid fights littered throughout this card. Thank you all for stopping by. If you enjoyed, hit the like button, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.